My name is Adam Brooks, and this happened 5 years ago when I was 24, living alone in a small rental house outside Indianapolis. It was cheap and old but close to work, and the landlord didn't mind that I paid a week or two late sometimes. The place looked normal enough from the outside. What I didn't know then was that someone else had been quietly living there long before I signed the lease. It started with noises, soft, irregular thuds against the wall behind my bedroom. I figured it was animals, or the house settling. Old houses creak, old pipes groan. Except these sounds came late at night, always after 2 in the morning, always from the same spot. One night I knocked on the wall jokingly. The sound that came back wasn't an echo. It was another knock, deliberate, 3 taps, slow. I threw on a sweatshirt and checked the outside of the house with a flashlight. Nothing. No branches hitting the siding. No animals. No signs of anyone outside. The next morning I called the landlord and told him I thought there were raccoons in the walls. He said he'd send someone out the next week. The next week never came. I tried ignoring it for a while. I kept earbuds in while I slept, but the knocks came more often. Sometimes tapping, sometimes slower, like dragging fingers along drywall. One night I heard something that made my blood go cold. A low, rough breath on the other side of the wall. Close. I told myself it was pipes, old vents, anything that wasn't what it sounded like. Then things in the house started moving. Not dramatically, just wrong enough that I doubted myself. My phone charger would be on the other side of the room in the morning. A box I left in the living room would be in the hallway. I blamed myself at first. Stress, forgetting. Until one night I came home from work and found every cabinet in the kitchen open. Wide open. I froze in the doorway. The house was silent. No footsteps. No movement. Nothing missing. Just open. I called the police. When the officers arrived, they walked through the place, checked every room, looked for signs of forced entry. They found nothing. All the windows were locked from the inside. No footprints outside. No tool marks on the doors. When I told them about the noises in the walls, they gave each other a look. Not a mocking one, a tired one. The older officer asked if I'd ever had sleep issues. The younger one asked if I had anyone else living with me. I said no. They didn't seem convinced. They wrote a report and left. The next night, the noises came again. Louder this time. Not knocking, shifting. Something heavy moving against the studs inside the wall. I pushed my bed away from that part of the room and slept on the couch. Around 4 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of footsteps overhead. Slow, steady. My attic didn't have flooring, just beams and insulation. Nobody should have been able to walk up there without falling through, but someone was moving. I could hear each step. I called the police again. When they checked the attic this time, they found something. Not a person, not an animal. Blankets. A small pile of old blankets tucked behind the chimney where the attic narrowed. A plastic water bottle. Wrappers. A flashlight with dying batteries. Footprints in the dust. One of the officers looked genuinely shaken. He asked how often I was home. I told him my work schedule. He asked if anyone else had a key. Only my landlord. They searched the entire house again. No one there. They told me to stay at a friend's place for the night, just to be safe. I packed a small bag and left. 2 days later, the police told me they couldn't prove anyone had actually been living there recently. The blankets could have been old. The footprints could have been from when the landlord did repairs. Without a person or a break-in, there wasn't much they could do. But I knew what I had heard. And worse, I realized something. The attic didn't connect to the wall behind my bedroom. There was no crawl space, no vent. No reason for noises to be coming from that exact place, unless someone had found or made a space inside the wall itself. I didn't go back right away. I crashed at my friend Mason's place for 3 days before finally returning to pack up for good. When I got to the house in daylight, everything seemed normal. Too normal. I kept expecting to find something stolen or broken, but the place looked untouched until I reached the bedroom. The wall behind the bed had a faint line running across it that I had never seen before. A narrow seam about 4 feet tall, almost invisible unless the sun hit it directly. I tugged at the baseboard and it shifted slightly. It wasn't nailed down. I pulled harder. The board came loose with a soft pop. Behind it was a small recessed gap in the wall, too dark to see inside. I lifted my phone and turned on the flashlight. A face looked back at me. Not alive. A mask. A plain rubber mask, staring out from the shadows. But behind the mask, I could see movement. Slow, deliberate breathing pushing the shadows in and out. Someone was inside the wall, sitting silently inches from where I slept every night. I stumbled back so fast I hit the dresser. I ran out of the house and didn't stop until I reached the car. My hands shook so badly I could barely dial 911. The police came. They searched. Harder this time. They pulled the baseboard off, opened the seam. The space was empty. The officer looked at me like I had imagined the entire thing. He told me the gap was probably an old maintenance space, and the mask was likely left there years ago. As for the breathing, he said it could have been air pressure shifting. The drafts in older homes can play tricks. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And there is one thing the officers couldn't explain. Inside that narrow hidden space, they found fresh footprints, bare footprints, leading deeper into the wall, toward a part of the structure that shouldn't have been accessible. They recommended I talk to my landlord. He told me someone had lived there before me, who left suddenly without giving notice. He didn't know why. I moved out that night. I never found out who was living in the walls, or how long they had been there, or why they chose that house. But sometimes, late at night in my new apartment, I swear I hear tapping in the drywall. Slow. 3 taps, just like before. And every time I hear it, I wonder if the person the police couldn't find ever really left. My name is Jason Turner, and this happened when I was 26, living in a cheap second-floor apartment outside Raleigh. The building was old, the walls were thin, and the stairwell light only worked half the time, but the rent was low, and the neighbors mostly kept to themselves. I thought I got lucky. The first call came around 11 on a Thursday night. I was finishing some leftover pizza when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally, I ignore those, but something made me answer. A woman whispered my name, not asked for me, not confirmed who I was. She whispered it like she was standing right beside me. Jason. My heart jumped. I asked who it was. She didn't reply. All I heard were shallow, shaky breaths, like she was trying not to cry. Then she hung up. I figured it was a wrong number. People get mixed up. Phones glitch. I told myself it was nothing. The second call came 20 minutes later. Same number, same whisper. Only this time, she said something else. He's here. I asked who she meant. No answer. Just breathing again. Soft, terrified breathing. Then, the line went dead. I tried calling back. It didn't ring. Just went straight to a disconnected message. That was the moment I started really listening to the apartment around me. The wind outside, the creaking pipes, the faint hum from the fridge. Everything suddenly sounded like footsteps. The third call came at 12:14. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity won. This time she was crying. Not loud, not messy, controlled, like she was trying not to make noise. I could barely hear her. Please help me. Her voice cracked. I asked where she was. The line hissed. Then she whispered something in a sharp, quick exhale. Your building. My stomach dropped. I asked which apartment. She didn't say. I asked if she was hurt. She didn't say. Instead, she whispered the words that kept me awake for weeks after. He followed me inside. Then the line went silent. Not disconnected, just silent. I grabbed my keys and ran downstairs to knock on every door on the first floor. Most people didn't open. One guy cracked his door and told me to leave him alone. The hallway felt too narrow, too dark. I kept expecting someone to appear at the far end. Nothing. No woman's voice. No crying. I called the police. I told them someone in my building sounded in danger. They asked if I knew which apartment. I didn't. They asked if I had seen anything. I hadn't. They sent a unit anyway. 2 officers showed up around 1. They checked the hallways, the stairwell, the laundry room, the parking lot. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No open doors. No crying woman. One officer asked if I had been drinking. I told him no. The other asked if I'd had prank calls before. I told him no. They took a statement and told me to call back if anything else happened. I felt stupid. I felt like they didn't believe a word I said. I went back upstairs and double-locked my door. At 2:20, my phone buzzed again. Same number. This time, when I answered, no one spoke. But I could hear something. A soft, scraping sound. It reminded me of fabric brushing against a wall. Then a door hinge creaking. Then footsteps. Slow ones. I whispered, hello. The footsteps stopped. The woman's voice came back, barely audible. Don't hang up. I asked where she was again. This time, she whispered an apartment number. 204. My legs almost gave out. That was my apartment. I felt like someone had poured ice water down my spine. I told her that she had the wrong number, that she must be confused. She whispered again, he's in your place. I spun around and stared through my own living room. Nothing was out of place. No shadows moving, no windows open, no doors cracked. Then she said something that made me drop the phone. He's behind the couch. My couch was pressed against the far wall. There was no space behind it. I forced myself to walk over anyway. My heart hammered so loud I could barely hear. I pulled the couch forward. Nothing. When I picked my phone back up, the line was dead again. I called the police a second time. I felt embarrassed doing it, but I didn't care anymore. When they arrived, they searched my entire apartment top to bottom. Closets, bathroom, cabinets, under the bed. They found nothing. The younger officer suggested maybe someone was using a spoofing app to scare me. The older officer asked if I had recently ended a relationship. I told them no. They exchanged a look, but didn't comment. Before leaving, the older officer paused and asked quietly if I was sure the woman wasn't someone I knew. I told him absolutely not. The voice was unfamiliar and terrified. They told me to block the number. I tried. My phone wouldn't let me. Every time I tapped block, it would flash an error, almost like the number didn't actually exist. The final call came at 4:38. I almost didn't answer, but something told me if I didn't, I'd never sleep again. When I picked up, the line was completely silent. No breathing, no crying. I said hello. Nothing. Then I heard a sound I still can't explain. A tiny click, like someone tapping metal against the phone. Another click. Then a man's voice. Low. Calm. Too calm. We already checked your place. My blood went cold. I asked who he was. He didn't answer. He took a quiet breath and said one more thing. But you didn't check mine. The line cut. I called the police again. This time they seemed frustrated. They came out anyway. They checked the apartments on both sides of mine. Everyone was asleep. They checked the floor below. Normal. They checked the floor above. Normal. No suspicious activity. No noise. No unlocked doors. The officers told me it was likely someone messing with me. A prank. A scammer. Something annoying but not dangerous. They told me to get some rest. I didn't sleep at all that night. Or the next. 3 days later, the apartment beside mine was vacated in the middle of the night. I heard the tenants loading bags quietly, whispering, telling someone to hurry. They drove off without telling anyone why. The landlord told me later that unit had been rented to a man who traveled a lot. No name given. Paid in cash. But here is the part I still think about. The part I never told the police because I didn't want them to brush me off again. The wall between my living room and that apartment had fresh scuff marks. Long, thin ones. As if someone had pressed their ear against it over and over. Sometimes, when my building goes quiet late at night, I swear I can hear faint breathing through that same wall. Slow, controlled, patient. The same breathing I heard on the phone before the police said they couldn't help me. My name is Matthew Cole, and this happened when I was 25, renting the top floor of a 2-story house outside Pittsburgh. The landlord lived out of state, and the bottom floor was a separate unit nobody had rented for months. The ad mentioned the basement was unfinished with limited access, which sounded like landlord code for mold or junk storage. I had been there almost 3 weeks before I realized something was wrong. The first thing I noticed was the door at the end of the hallway. It led to the basement staircase. It was always locked with a heavy deadbolt. The landlord had told me not to use it, said the basement was empty and unsafe. At first, I didn't think much about it. Then small things began happening. The lights in the hallway flickered around 2 or 3 in the morning. Always the hallway, never anywhere else. Sometimes a soft thump came from beneath the floorboards, like someone walking around under me. I assumed it was pipes, but pipes don't walk. A few nights later, I came home around 11 and found the basement door unlocked. Not wide open, just unlatched. I stared at it for a long time, trying to remember if I had locked it earlier. I always did. I was sure. I called the landlord. He said the door shouldn't be unlocked because he had both basement keys on him across the country. He told me to get a chain lock for peace of mind. That didn't help. The next night, around 3 in the morning, I woke up to the faint sound of movement directly below my bedroom. A slow, sliding shuffle. Not rats, not pipes, something heavier. I grabbed a flashlight, opened my bedroom door, and stepped into the hallway. The air felt different, cooler, still. The basement door was cracked open, just half an inch, enough to see darkness behind it. I closed it calmly, locked it, and pushed a chair against it. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, I convinced myself it was nothing. People imagine things when they're tired. Houses settle, air pressure shifts. I went to work. When I came home that evening, the chair was moved. Not much, just rotated slightly. Subtle enough that someone could say, I bumped it earlier. But I knew I hadn't. The basement door was still locked, but something cold crawled up my spine. For the next few days, I heard footsteps. Always late, always slow, sometimes pacing, sometimes stopping right under where I stood. Every time I got close to the basement door, the air felt colder. Finally, I called the police. I told them I thought someone might be living in the basement without the landlord knowing. 2 officers came out. They searched the exterior first, then asked for the basement key. I told them the landlord had it. They forced the door open anyway. The basement stairs were steep and narrow. Dust caked the railings. The officers went down first, while I stayed behind them. At the bottom was a large open room with concrete floors and support beams. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a weak circle of light. It looked empty, until one of the officers pointed to the far corner, a mattress. Thin, old, stained, laid out flat on the concrete. Next to it was a small pile of clothes, a water bottle, and 2 empty cans of food. Someone had been staying down there. Recently, my mouth went dry. I told the officers I had heard footsteps, and the door kept unlocking. One officer walked over to the mattress, lifted it slightly, and found something underneath. A phone, dead, scuffed, screen cracked. They bagged it as evidence. The officers checked every inch of the basement, even behind the support beams, but found no person. They told me whoever had been staying there had likely left through the exterior access door. Except there wasn't an exterior access door, just a boarded-up hatch. Nobody could have opened it without me noticing from upstairs. Still, the police said there was nothing more they could do without a suspect. They told me to keep the door locked and call again if anything else happened. One officer even suggested maybe the supplies were left there a long time ago and I was scaring myself. I knew better. That night, I slept on the couch with the hallway light on. Around 2, a faint creak echoed through the floor, then another, and another. Slow steps rising from below. I grabbed the flashlight again and listened. 1 step, then silence. Something scraped along the inside of the basement door. Soft, careful, like fingertips dragging across wood. I didn't move. My lungs barely worked. After what felt like an hour, the scraping stopped. No footsteps returning down the stairs, just nothing. When the sun came up, I packed a bag and left for my friend Ryan's place. I told him everything. He joked about squatters, but stopped when he saw how shaken I was. I stayed with him 2 nights. When I came back to grab the rest of my things, something waited for me, pinned to the basement door with a thumbtack. A note. 4 words written in shaky handwriting. I knew you heard. I called the police again. They came out, took the note, and walked the house. No signs of entry, no fingerprints, no footprints, no explanation. They told me again they couldn't do much. The landlord would have to secure the property better. I moved out that same day. A month later, the landlord called to say the new tenants downstairs complained about noises in the walls, said they kept hearing someone walk the basement at night even though it was empty. He asked if I had ever noticed anything like that. I hung up without answering, because the truth is the police never found the man who lived in the basement, and sometimes I wonder if he ever really left at all, or if he found another way in, another hollow space between walls where he could listen to people trying to sleep.